It's always interesting trying to figure out how things will unfold prophetically speaking, but I've talked about this before and I just figured it would be a good time to bring it up again since it's right around the corner. So we'll listen to this clip. It's a clip of Michelle Bachmann, who ran for president a couple years back, and Jan Markell, and they are both super solid in their biblical foundation. And so listen to this just so you can see what is on the forecast.
I'm going to play a clip of you, Michelle. We're going back a year here when you were in Switzerland to the World Health Organization.
Yes.
It's coming up again in a month. I want to revisit what you said a year ago and how it might play out today.
The attempted power grab described by Bachmann involves the World Health Organization, or WHO. Through a series of 307 amendments and a global pandemic treaty, the WHO seeks to gain authority over health decisions of UN member nations that could affect the rest of the world in the case of something like another COVID pandemic.
Then they would be empowered to tell us in America, we have to lock down. We have to shut down. We have to close our churches. We have to close our schools. We're mandated to take a vaccine, whether we want to or not. We're forced to mask. We're forced to whatever it is that they tell us that we have to do. We have never before in history, in 5,000 years of recorded human history, we've never seen this level of authority given to an international global body.
Those supporting this authority for the WHO, such as top advisor Dr. Abdullah Asiri, say it's necessary to protect the world's population, even if it means restricting some of their liberties. Bachmann sees little to no opposition from nations' top leaders in handing over this power starting next year.
I don't think all the nations fully understand what these implications are, so we have very little time.
Some in Congress oppose this move to further empower the WHO. They've proposed legislation that would deem it a treaty. A treaty would require Senate approval. Bachmann, however, claims the White House is trying an end run around these lawmakers.
The Biden administration doesn't plan to bring this treaty back to the U.S. Senate because they're using a subterfuge. They're calling it not a treaty, they're calling it an accord. And they're saying this isn't a treaty, this is just an accord, we can do this, we don't need the involvement of the U.S. government. But once you give government and power away, it's very hard to get it back.
The former Congresswoman points out the Bible warns world-dominating power will bring trouble.
When you look at what the Bible says and the convergence of events that we are seeing across the world right now and what the prophets from the Bible have said, we need to really pay attention to what's going on, because this is the creation of a platform for global government.
So, Michelle Bachmann, what you're saying basically in that little 3-minute clip was the World Health Organization, and this was a year ago, May of last year, you were there. And you observed their wheeling and dealing, trying to get their platform of what World Health Organization is trying to do for pandemic treaty, etc. And now it's coming up in a month. Help us understand what's going on and what are the dangers to my listeners.
The World Health Assembly is the governance body over the World Health Organization. Yes. And nobody cared who they were, what they did. People assumed they were just a group of doctors trying to do the best that they could to stamp out diseases and to create immunities. Well, then along came COVID.
Yep.
And so when COVID happened, that increased the visibility and the power of the World Health Organization like nothing we'd ever seen before, because governments all of a sudden had dictatorial, authoritarian power over their citizenry. Here in the United States, we had suspension of our constitutional rights for 3 years, and governors and mayors and the President of the United States declared emergency powers, which suspended our rights as citizens, but empowered them to tell us to do things they could have never done without emergency powers. Well, now the Biden administration wants to transfer emergency powers to the World Health Organization on a global scale, so that now that would effectively create a platform for one world government, for global government. So the World Health Organization, which people saw was very effective and created authoritarian power, could now be created permanently, a permanent emergency, if you will, so that this platform for global governance could trigger at any time of their choosing emergency powers. And trust me, it would happen very quickly. And then they'd have the power to tell us what we can do, what we can't do, We all have to have digital pocketbooks. In other
right.
words, our cell phones would have to have a digital code so that each of one of us are in compliance with the WHO, the World Health Organization, says. In other words, what does this mean? It means that we lose our rights as freeborn citizens in America. Our elected leaders aren't elected anymore. They're overridden by what an international body says. And very quickly, the world slides away into global government. Jan, you and I had this conversation earlier when we were talking about Israel. Here the United States is, the big, powerful nation, telling Israel what they can and can't do on winning a war. Well, imagine the United States being in this situation where we're attacked and an international global entity tells us, America, you have to lose your war. We can't imagine that as Americans. Every day in our life, we've grown up thinking we are the military and economic superpower of the world. We have options. You don't have options when there's an international global government, and that's what's expected to happen. So now the end of May of 2024, they'll meet again,
right.
And it's expected that this year will be the year when they pass these various amendments to the International Health Rules and the Global Pandemic Treaty, both of which together would then empower the World Health Organization to be the decision maker over all the nations on Earth. If the 194 nations on Earth give that power over to the World Health Organization, and if the leaders of those countries are willing to carry out the dictates of the World Health Organization, well, then you've got governance of a global government. And as a matter of fact, they call for something called Council of the Parties. Very quickly, they're going to do away with the international health rules. They'll do away with the World Health Assembly. Instead, there'll be 5, 10 self-appointed people, and these self-appointed people will call the shots at the World Health Organization and realize that's the healthcare arm, the United Nations. So they won't be about healthcare anymore. Now they'll be about global government. And then they will be calling the shots for all of us. That is something that the Bible anticipates prophetically, but I was there last year. Every nation was on board, including the United States, including Israel. They didn't see the threat, I think, of what this could mean.
How do you see it playing out in May?
Very likely this will pass, and then there's a period of time before it, quote, becomes law. I think it could be as quick as 10 months after they pass this in the end of May, essentially June 1st. That would be the fastest scenario when this would come into effect. It could take a few more months more than that. So if they get their way sometime in 2025, the governance would be in place, and assuming those who are in political positions of power in the various nations, assuming they still go along with it and their citizenry hasn't rebelled, we will be under global governance. So I see it coming into fruition along about 2025. The year that we read a lot about is 2030.
2030,
When
correct.
in 2030, we will lose all freedom and we will lose our ability to do anything, because all of these globalists, the World Economic Forum types, they're all saying 2030 is the year. So it'll be messy between 2025 and 2030 to get all of their ducks in a row in order to be able to deny us, because it's about denying us freedom and denying us privilege. But that's their plan. And that's when we look at Psalms 2.
Yes.
That said the nations of the world get together and they make their plans. But where is God? He's sitting upon his throne very confidently, very thoroughly, laughing, saying, this is what you thought was going to happen.
So this treaty or accord is right around the corner, and I'm not sharing this information again to scare anybody. I'm just sharing it to inform you guys. I'm sharing it to stir you up with the hopes of stirring you up so that you can get out there and tell somebody about Jesus while there's still time, because time could be short. So hopefully you use this as a tool to get motivated, to be more emboldened to share the gospel, which can be found in 1 Corinthians 15, 1-4. Thanks, guys.